ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that the confirmation that Peter is still alive spreads through Port Charles like a shockwave, not because people believed he was truly gone, but because the manner of his return proves that his disappearance was never an ending, it was a recalibration. Hidden away long enough to be forgotten, but never long enough to be irrelevant, Peter emerges now as a weapon sharpened by the very darkness that once consumed him. And standing behind this resurrection is Sidwell, a man who has quietly studied the fragments of chaos left behind by Faison and decided that the only way to control the unpredictable landscape of power in Port Charles is to resurrect the one mind twisted enough to continue a legacy, built on psychological warfare and emotional destruction. Sidwell presents himself publicly as a guardian figure, someone determined to protect Willow from political threats and personal danger, but the truth is far more insidious. He knows Willow's rising influence makes her a target, and instead of shielding her by eliminating the danger, he chooses to create a controlled version of it. In his eyes, the best way to protect her is to make her dependent on him, and to do that, he must dismantle everything around her piece by piece, until he becomes the only anchor she has left. Peter becomes the perfect instrument for this. Rather than attacking Willow directly, Peter focuses on someone whose collapse would ripple through every corner of her life, Chase. Chase, with his sense of duty and deeply rooted emotional vulnerabilities, becomes an irresistible target. Peter studies him with the same cold precision Faison once used on his victims, identifying the soft edges of guilt and fear that can be twisted into panic, impulsivity, and irrational behavior. And once he begins, the transformation happens fast. Chase starts experiencing episodes of confusion, bursts of anger, and moments where reality fractures just enough to send him spiraling. He believes he is losing control because of internal weakness, but the truth is far more cruel. Every breakdown, every mistake, every misstep is the result of deliberate manipulation, reaching into his mind like invisible claws shaped by Peter's newfound expertise in psychological conditioning. Sidwell watches this unfold with a disturbing calmness, neither surprised nor horrified by the unraveling of a good man. To him, Chase is merely a mechanism, a trigger point designed to destabilize Willow emotionally and politically. If Chase loses himself, Willow becomes distracted, vulnerable, and overwhelmed. She becomes easier to shape, and Sidwell needs her to be malleable, especially now that she is stepping into a realm where enemies multiply faster than allies. What he does not anticipate, however, is the way Peter evolves beyond his role. Peter begins to enjoy the control, the way he can fracture a man without leaving a single visible bruise. It makes him feel alive again, as though Faison's legacy is no longer a weight he carries, but a crown he has inherited. Meanwhile, Willow senses that something is deeply wrong, but she cannot identify the source. She mistakes Chase's downward spiral for stress, grief, and emotional exhaustion, unaware that she is walking straight into the center of a storm designed specifically for her. Every time Chase lashes out or retreats into himself, she feels the ground beneath her shift a little more, and that creeping instability begins infecting the rest of her life. She tries to keep her focus on her public responsibilities, but the fear that she is losing someone she cares about pulls at her until her judgment becomes blurred around the edges. Sidwell sees this as confirmation that his strategy is working. He continues feeding subtle pressure into her life, soft enough that she never suspects him, steady enough that she gradually begins to rely on him as the only stable presence left. The danger grows quietly, spreading through relationships like cracks forming beneath the surface of ice. Carly senses something wrong but cannot place her finger on it. Anna feels old instincts stirring a familiar dread, whispering that wherever Peter goes, suffering follows. Even Valentin, who has known the truth longer than anyone, feels a tightening of an internal conflict he has spent years trying to bury. He knows Sidwell has awakened a monster, but saying anything now would expose the lies he hid, the truths he allowed to fester. And so he stays silent, watching the board shift as Peter becomes bolder, more confident, more like the ghost of Faison than the man he once pretended to be. As Chase continues to break apart, the threat reaches a point of no return. His mind begins to fracture into dangerous shadows, and in those shadows, Peter lurks like a puppeteer, savoring every twitch of the strings. There are moments when Chase stands alone, trembling with confusion, hearing whispers that aren't there, convinced he is losing his sanity. And in those moments, Peter watches from afar, knowing the collapse of one man will soon become the collapse of many. Port Charles is sliding toward a disaster no one sees coming, a disaster engineered not through violence or weapons, but through the quiet destruction of trust, perception, and stability. And with every piece that crumbles, Peter feels Faison's legacy settling onto his shoulders like a mantle he was born to wear. The question now is not whether Port Charles will fall into chaos, but who will realize the truth in time to stop Peter before the ruin becomes irreversible. For every moment Sidwell believes he is in control, Peter grows stronger, and somewhere beneath all the lies and manipulated intentions, Willow stands unknowingly at the center of a war between past and present, legacy and ambition, sanity and madness, a war that has only just begun. The truth that Peter is manipulating Chase becomes the spark that ignites a much larger and far more dangerous chain. The reaction across Port Charles. Because Chase is not simply losing control, he is being reshaped into a weapon. Every irrational impulse, every burst of aggression, every reckless decision is calibrated by Peter with surgical precision, using Chase's vulnerabilities as anchor points to pull him deeper into a mental labyrinth from which he cannot escape. And as Chase continues to unravel, the people closest to him become the unintentional casualties of a mind war they cannot see. Michael begins noticing inconsistencies, moments when Chase appears almost vacant, like he is listening to a voice only he can hear. Moments when he becomes unpredictable, volatile, or disturbingly cold. At first, Michael assumes it is stress, trauma, resurfacing unresolved guilt. But then the tension grows sharper, more erratic, more dangerous. Chase starts appearing at the wrong places at the wrong times, asking strange questions, following people with no explanation, even showing flashes of hostility towards Sonny and Carly, as though someone has whispered into his mind that they are threats instead of allies. And Michael, caught between fear and disbelief, senses that something malevolent is driving Chase past every mental boundary he once held sacred. What Michael cannot see, but Peter cherishes, is the invisible string connecting Chase to the targets Peter has chosen with chilling intent. By destabilizing Chase, Peter gains access to the emotional weak spots surrounding Michael, Sonny, and Carly. He wants to fracture their alliances, poison their sense of safety, make them question each other at the very moment they should be uniting. Sonny becomes uneasy when Chase begins showing up unexpectedly near his operations, lingering on the edges like a man searching for meaning in shadows. Carly feels a creeping wrongness in every interaction with him, a sense that the dependable man she once trusted has been replaced by a hollow reflection hiding a darkness that does not belong to him. And Peter watches this all unfold with a quiet satisfaction because chaos is not simply the means, it is the message. He wants Port Charles to remember the legacy of fear he was born into, the legacy he now intends to resurrect. But beneath all of this, the unraveling mind, the strategic destabilization, the manipulation of Chase like a marionette carved from guilt and confusion, lies Peter's true obsession, Anna. His fixation on her never died. It only mutated, becoming sharper, darker, more intimate in its cruelty. Now that he has returned from the dead, he believes Anna must acknowledge him, must face the consequences of every choice she made that shaped his twisted existence. She is the ghost he cannot let go of, the unfinished story he plans to rewrite on his own terms. And by using Chase to disrupt the people she cares about, he ensures that Anna cannot ignore the message he is sending. He is back, and he is finally becoming the man Faison always wanted him to be. Anna begins sensing the patterns before anyone else. The subtle shifts in behavior, the strange coincidences, the shadows that seem to follow her even in daylight. She felt this kind of dread once before, long ago, when Faison stalked her with the devotion that blended obsession and cruelty into one terrifying force. Now she senses that same energy pulsing through the city again, but this time it is not Faison's ghost she fears. It is Peter emerging reborn from the darkness with a mind no longer fractured by doubt or desperation. He has clarity now, a clarity that makes him far more dangerous. And as she investigates the source of Chase's erratic behavior, she begins to see the threads connecting him to something far more calculated than trauma. She realizes that someone is sculpting his madness, guiding his breakdown with deliberate intent. And when she finally follows those threads to the edges of Peter's shadow, her blood runs cold. Meanwhile, Sonny begins preparing for the possibility that Chase, whether willingly or unwillingly, has become a threat. He knows what it looks like when someone is being manipulated, but he also knows the cost of letting sentiment cloud judgment. Carly feels torn between compassion and fear, recognizing that Chase is spiraling, yet unable to determine whether he is a danger to her family or simply a victim of a yet unseen force. Michael tries to intervene, tries to hold on to the version of Chase he once knew, but the man in front of him is slipping away piece by piece. As Peter's influence tightens around him like a psychological noose, the situation worsens when Chase begins receiving commands he cannot distinguish from his own thoughts, commands that push him closer to Sonny's territory, commands that place him near Carly at moments of heightened vulnerability, commands that lure him into direct opposition with Michael. And Peter, hidden in the dark, monitors every ripple of panic and confusion with the cold satisfaction of a tormentor who finally understands his own power. For Peter, controlling Chase is not merely an act of revenge or chaos, it is a declaration. It is a warning, and it is a prelude to the confrontation he dreams of having with Anna, the woman whose approval he once sought but whose regret he now demands. Port Charles stands on the edge of a new nightmare, one shaped not by violence, but by psychological sabotage, so intricate that even the strongest alliances begin to crack beneath its pressure. As Chase descends further into the maze, Peter built inside his mind the danger to Michael, Sonny, and Carly grows more severe, more immediate, more unavoidable. And Anna, the only one who understands the depth of Peter's obsession, realizes that stopping him will require stepping into the very darkness she has spent her entire life trying to escape. Because Peter is no longer just a remnant of Faison's legacy, he is the evolution of it. The embodiment of a new kind of terror that threatens not only the city, but the fragile humanity of everyone caught in its orbit. When Maxie finally opens her eyes after days suspended between life and oblivion, the world around her feels unsettlingly quiet, almost too still, as though the universe itself is holding its breath. What she doesn't know, what no one in Port Charles is prepared for, is that Peter has been waiting for this exact moment, feeding his obsession in the shadows, crafting a fantasy in which her awakening signals the beginning of their reclaimed future. His fixation has never faded. It has sharpened, intensified, becoming the one guiding force that gives him purpose as he moves like a ghost through the city. And now as Maxie stirs back to consciousness, Peter steps out from the darkness he has been hiding in, emerging with the quiet, chilling confidence of a man who believes fate has finally aligned with his desires. The room around her dims as if swallowed by his presence, and though she cannot yet see him, Maxie feels the air shift, the subtle, suffocating pressure of someone watching her with a devotion that borders on predatory need. Peter has convinced himself that her survival is a sign that she belongs to him in a way no one else can understand, and he plans to reclaim her with a meticulous determination born from equal parts delusion and hunger. The instant Maxie becomes aware that she is not alone, panic flickers through her, an instinctive recognition of danger woven through the fog of recovery. She senses something familiar yet terrifying, a presence she prayed would stay buried, and then he steps forward, letting the dim light catch the edges of his face, revealing himself not as a memory or nightmare, but as a man who has defied death and returned with renewed obsession. Peter whispers nothing. He doesn't need to. His silence speaks louder than any declaration could, and Maxie feels her pulse spike as the reality settles over her. Peter never died, never disappeared, never let go. He has been waiting like a shadow stitched to her fate, and now that she is awake, he intends to finish what he believes was stolen from him. The tension explodes into the air, thick and volatile, because Peter's version of love has always been a cage. And Maxie knows that his reappearance means the nightmare she thought she escaped is about to consume her once again. His fixation, sharpened by years of hiding, has evolved into something darker, more possessive, a force powerful enough to ignite chaos throughout Port Charles. And as Peter reaches toward her with that unsettling calmness, Maxie realizes that her awakening has not brought her freedom. It has awakened the monster that was waiting for her. Heartbeat to return, ready to pull her back into the shadows where he believes she belongs.